What's going on, you guys? My name is Matt, and welcome back to Matt's Pokemon World. That's right, I mentioned it last episode, but I have now split my channel into two, and this one will just focus on Pokemon, and I have another one where I just post a bunch of random videos because I enjoy it. So if you want to subscribe to that, I will leave a link in the description below. We have a very interesting episode this week. We have the strongest top 10 error value increase list that I have ever seen, and just a lot of very interesting Pokemon cards to take a look at. So let's get right into it. Kicking things off, we have a Colress's experiment with a crimp and cut error. That is where the crimp is so severe that it actually cuts the card in half. It's not too often that you get to see a card cut in half by a crimping machine. I think that's very interesting. And this kind of reminds me of the Canadians from South Park. I'll post a little video here just to show you what I'm talking about, how their mouth is not connected to the rest of their body. I think that's pretty funny. And you can see that this error added a lot of value to this card. Typically goes for around $1.45, and this one sold for $41 this week. And this had an error value increase of 2,728%, but did not make the top 10. So I was not lying about how strong this top 10 is. Next up, we have a first edition Shadowless Machamp with an off-center error. You can see this got graded a PSA 8 and is a lot more top heavy than bottom heavy. Interesting enough, I believe we had a PSA 8 off-center error, same exact card, but it was more bottom heavy. I think that was last week. And this PSA 8 sold for $500 this week. Next up, we have a base set War Turtle with the Evolution Box error. You can see War Turtle is printed twice on this card. Should be Squirtle up there on the top left. There have been previous episodes I have posted where War Turtle in this Evolution Box error is actually number 1 on the list. But with how strong this list is this week, this one came in at number 8 this week on the error value increase. It sold for $81.01. Next up, we have a Topps Meowth TV11 with a miscut. Now, this one isn't any record breaker by any means, but I absolutely love the contrast in this card. You can see the bottom of the card is another completely different card, and it's just night and day difference. I absolutely love that. I was looking on pricecharting.com to see what the non-error version of this card was, and it did not have a raw version listed for price. So I looked up recently sold cards on eBay, and it went for around $15. So not a crazy error value increase, but again, just love the contrast of this miscut. And this one sold for $35. By the way, if you can't tell, I got a new microphone. Thank you so much for everyone who stuck with me during my bad microphone phase. I cannot tell you how many times it would cut out, and just the quality was absolutely horrible. And so I picked up a halfway decent microphone, and I hope this improves the video quality. Next up, we have our NFC, or Not Factory Cut card of the week. You can see this one is from Neo Genesis. You can see this card features about 60% of Cyndaquil and 3 other cards there. We got alignment dot kind of towards the center of the card. Always very interesting, and this one always sells for a pretty reasonable price, $207.50. I think it's cool that people kind of get a piece of history here. And yeah, not much more to say about that. On to the next card. Okay, this next one is interesting. We have a Kyogre V with a double printing error. So you can see the card on the right has a Kyogre V, and it also has part of the back of a card. So it's basically like each card is like 50% opacity, and they put them on top of each other. And the back of the card is actually probably right behind me here. I think I moved out of the way. But you can see it is completely shiny. In all 14 previous episodes, I would probably say this is a very, very cool card. But I realized I say that way too much. So I pulled out the old thesaurus, and I'll be using different words to describe how I feel about these Pokemon cards. This right here is a marvelous card. Absolutely love it. It sold in auction this week for $633.29. It has an error value increase of 6,937% and is number 4 this week on our error value increase list. Oh yeah, this is also a German card. Next up, we have a Snorlax from Jungle Set with the no jungle symbol error. This is a PSA 10 card, and my goodness, it sold for a lot of money this week. This card was listed for $8,000 and had the best accepted offer price of $4,500. Typically, I would say we need to put out some thoughts and prayers for this buyer because they way overpaid. But not this week. I'm not as pessimistic this week. I am saying we have a new pioneer here. It looks like this card in the PSA 10 sells about 1 time a year, And so this just upped the average a lot. So I would say I have a new perspective on this. And congrats to the baller who can spend $4,500 on a Pokemon card. I think you're living most of our dreams here. Next up, we have a base set Jinx with the crimp error on the top. Now you can see the crimp goes all the way across evenly on the top of the card. I like that. I don't know why. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing than seeing a wonky crimp. It's kind of cool to think that this Jinx card was in a pack just like this, but you see the crimp on the top there got crimped onto the card. This card was listed for $40 but had a best accepted offer price of $30 and had an error value increase of 2,156%, but again, did not make the top 10. Next up, we have a cracked ice Charizard with a hollow bleed, and this one is not going to break any records. Didn't have a crazy high sale price or a crazy EVI. The first thing that came to my mind was, what does a cracked ice hollow bleed look like? So you can see I have a video on the screen here that the seller posted, and I just thought it'd be interesting to take a look at this and to share it with you guys. So this card was listed for $40 but had a best accepted offer price of $35. Next up, we have a first edition Porygon 2 from Neo Revelation, and this is a double hollow variant. Pretty easy to tell that this is a double hollow. You can see that Porygon on the left has a white border around it, and the card on the right has no border around Porygon, the Pokemon itself. And as far as double hollows go, this is actually a pretty good EVI, around 600%. You can see this card sold for $275 this week. Next up, we have a Black Star promo Dark Persian with the no HP error. I think it's very nifty when a card can have an error that is missing something so critical, such as HP. And this card was listed for $285, but sold for $50 less than that for $235. Next up, we have a Black Star promo Squirtle from Pokemon 151 with that hollow border, and this is the square cut error. So Pokemon cards are cut in two different steps. The first step cuts the card into the shape that you see on the right here is the Squirtle with 4 square corners, and then the second step is supposed to round off those corners. Obviously, this card missed that second step, which gives it the square corner error, and I absolutely love this. You can see it got graded a CGC 9. I think we can get anything modern selling for over $100. That's always a very good sale price. You can see this card sold for $153. Next up, we have a base set Beedrill with the D.offending offending error. Under Poison Sting, you can see that there is a period after the D in defending, and this is a repeating error. This got graded a CGC 6 and sold for less than I thought it should have. Now, I couldn't find any comparable sale prices for cards that were graded. About a month ago, I saw a raw Beedrill with a D.offending error sell for $409. So a CGC 6 selling for $115 seems a little bit low, which would explain why the EVI isn't as high as some of the other ones. I know the other one about a month ago placed very high in the top 10. But yes, this Beedrill sold for $115.50. Next up, we have a lot of 4 Topps Pokemon cards with miscuts. Typically, I don't do an EVI for lots that are sold just because I couldn't be bothered to do the math. But I cared enough this week to do the math, and you can see that each card, the non-error version, typically sells for $2.87, which would give an average of 1,730% for each card for the error value increase. I absolutely love these cards. You can see that they were actually neighbors on the uncut sheet before they were cut up. So yes, this lot sold for $210 this week and had a pretty good EVI, as I said. Also, I listed 3 of the non-error cards as Topps Chrome. I should not have done that. I should have listed the other ones, but I couldn't have been bothered to change that. So I guess I don't care as much as I thought I did. Next up, we have a Dark Dragonite with the no hollow error. And this got graded an Auto 10, so not PSA 10, but an Auto 10. And this card was signed by the artist Mitsuhiro Arita, who actually drew a lot of the classic Pokemon that we know, but also Dragonite itself. And this card sold for a lot of money. You can see it sold for $2,928. And when I was prepping for this video, I realized that I put the price for the PSA 10 version of this card, which I think would probably be right, because it's kind of hard to compare an Auto 10 to a PSA 10, but regardless of that, this card had an error value increase of 3,153%, and is number 9 on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have a Salamence from Secret Wonders with a Hollow Bleed. And you can see this Hollow Bleed added a lot of value to this card. It typically doesn't add that much. Typically goes for around $4.20, but this one sold for $74.03 this week. Next up, we have a Jungle Snorlax with an additional ink error. This one is actually a repeating error. So you can see the left side of the card is missing a portion of its hollow, and this is due to an additional white undercoat ink. This is a very high sale price for a raw Pokemon card. You can see it was listed for $800, but had the best accepted offer price of $600. And also, I like to point out mistakes when I find them. I put this is not a repeating error, but it is in fact a repeating error. Next up, we have a Kyogre Hollow Black Star promo with a miscut that sold for way more than I thought it should. Typically, I like to bash sellers that list cards for too high, but I gotta give it to this seller. They demonstrated the perfect example of price anchoring, where you set the card price so high that when you give it a discount of $600, it seems like a steal. And so when this card sold for $200, I'm sure the buyer felt pretty good, but in fact, I don't think it should have sold for nearly that much. Typically goes for around $3.56. And with an error value increase of 5,518%, this is number 6 on our list of EVI. Okay, I need you guys to settle in here. We have a couple of interesting cards coming up here. Next up, we have a Shadowless Ninetales with the no damage error. Under Fire Blast, you should see an 80 on the right side of the card, but that is missing. And you can see that this seller is Millennium Rose. This card was listed for $750 and had the best accepted offer price of $642. And you can see the back of the card has a little bit of whitening kind of all around the card, so it's really not in the best shape here. But regardless of that, it had an error value increase of 3,622%, which is number 10 on our list of EVI. Next up, we have a Shadowless Ninetales with the no damage error once again. This seller is Blaze Hyatt, and this card was listed for $1,500, but had a best accepted offer price of $1,150. If we take a look at the back of the card, you can see that it's in better shape than the last one, but still has a little bit of wear and tear on the corners and the edges, and so definitely nowhere near perfect condition. And this card had an error value increase of 6,567%. Next up, we have a Shadowless Ninetales with a no damage error, and you can see that this card sold for a lot more than the other two. This was listed for $2,000 and had a best accepted offer price of $1,400. And this seller was Pokemon Place. The point I'm trying to get here is we have 3 different sellers selling the same card with different varying degrees of quality for the card and condition. I think it's very interesting. This card doesn't sell too often. You know, when I'm doing my recap, I can usually have a pretty good understanding of how often a card sells, and to see 3 pop up in the span of 1 week is pretty incredible. And yes, with a sale of $1,400, the error value increase is 8,016%. And if we look at the back of the card, you can see it's in a lot better condition than the other 2. And this EVI puts it at number 3 this week on our error value increase list. Next up, we have a base set Clefairy that got graded a PSA 9. And this Clefairy has a red heart printer hickey, which is a repeating error. This is just a phenomenal card, very high grade, and you gotta give it to the seller. Boy, did they shoot for the moon. Listed it for $10,800, but the best accepted offer price was $2,000. So they shoot for the freaking moon, and they still got $2,000. I don't know what the lesson is there. I guess aim high and hold out for a good offer. Again, I've been saying this whole episode, an error value increase of 2,473%, but is not in the top 10. And next up, we have a base set Tangela with a repeating printer hickey error. You can see that large circle on the right side of the card. So this is the same on several other of these cards. And this one sold for a lot of money. To have a basic Pokemon card sell for $175. That's pretty incredible. You can see right below 366 on this video, I have the non-error price per grade. I always think it's kind of interesting to take a look at that. A BGS 10, so absolutely perfect pristine card, sells for $44 for this. So this error adds a lot of value to the card. And typically I save the highest EVI for the end of the video. And if you're looking, we're not at the end of the video, so this card is not number 1 this week, but is number 2 this week with 15,666% error value increase. First time I've seen this card in 15 weeks. Next up, we have a PSA 9 double hollow variant Shining Gyarados from Neo Revelation. You can tell this one is double hollow because everything is darker. That's the best way that I can tell for this card. This one's a little bit tougher for me than some of the other ones. And had a very high sale price, $2,800 for PSA 9. Boy, I don't even know what the heck a PSA 10 would go for. You can see EVI is pretty good, 286%. And yes, Shining Gyarados, I think, is my favorite Pokemon card. I have the non-error version of this card. Believe me, I've checked several times to make sure it's not a double hollow variant. Yes, just a magnificent card. Next up, we have a pre-release Ivysaur from Crystal Guardians. And this is the misaligned stamp error. Now, we had one of these cards show up last week, actually. And the stamp was misaligned in a different way. This one is more severe. This one's kind of going at a 45-degree angle from where it should be at. And I love that the shadow is still on the appropriate part of the card where it should be. And I said this last week and I'll say it again. This card I thought would be in the top 10, but due to the average non-error price being higher than I thought it would be, even with 1500% EVI, did not make the top 10, and this card sold for $315 this week. And I tricked you guys. I put a card in between the Shining Gyaradoses, but there is actually a PSA 10 that sold. I told you I didn't know what the price would be. We do know what the price is. $7,877 for a Shining Gyarados double hollow variant. Holy cow! That is a lot of money. PSA 10. Incredible. Not much more to say about that. That's a lot of money. Next up, we have a Ditto V with a severe miscut. You can see it has about 90% of Ditto V on there and 10% of another card. I am not sure which card that is. And that bumped up the EVI quite a bit for this card. It typically sells for $2.31, but this one sold for $102.50. Like I said, if you can see a modern card sell for over $100, you know you got something incredible. And this one's just raw. I don't know what the sale price will be once it gets graded. We'll see. I can't really tell how good of a condition it's in. If it's a more modern card, I think people are pretty good at putting those in a sleeve right away. And with an EVI of 4,337%, this is number 7 this week on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have a card that is not too spectacular by any means. Sale price is pretty low compared to some of these other cards that we had, but I really enjoy Swampert. I love this card. I remember carrying this card around in one of those vintage Pokemon tins. I would carry my best cards with me anywhere I went, and I kept them in pretty good condition. But this just brings back a lot of nostalgia for me, and you can see it has a slight crimp on the top left of the card. So no other reason for choosing this besides for just a little bit of nostalgia on my end. And yes, it sold for $10 this week. And I do have to admit, I did strategically place this card in the order that I did because I just anchored the price to around $10 and the EVI to 234%. So now, when I show you this last card, it's even more shocking. We have a Grass Energy card from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with an absolutely crazy, severe, wonky, crazy, twisted miscut. You can see the card is missing about probably 50% of its mass. I don't know what the heck happened during the cutting process where the card was cut, got so twisted. I'm sure there's others out there like this, but this card sold for a lot of money. It was listed for $600, but had a best accepted offer price of $300. And usually I abide by what price charting says, and so I followed those rules. It says the average non-error price is 38 cents. Typically I don't see cards go for lower than 99 cents. I like to think that you include shipping for that, but I went by what it said, so 38 cents, and that gives this card 78,584% error value increase and is number 1 on our list of EVI. Absolutely sensational. I love it. Alright, if you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I found a way to kind of be a little bit more efficient with how I do things, and I also cut down on the number of cards. That kind of makes my workload a little bit less, so I will be continuing the series, and I really appreciate all the support. I'll see you guys next week.